This research was very much interested in hearing from elders in their own voice, which is so important, in their own voice, how they would articulate this giving up experience. Where does it come from? How does it feel? How do they know it's there? Why is it there? They wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I want us to zoom into this giving up experience a little bit more. Why do we want to do this? Do we want to do this? Why? To, get down or to, none of that. No. I want us to look at it more closely because I want us to be able to catch it when we start to feel it. And I want us to be able to catch it in each other. We need to be able to identify when someone is slipping into this space. We need to be able to know how to manage it for ourselves. And it's a tricky old thing, it sneaks up on people, I think. And that's why if we're alert to it, we can move it back into the right territory. Now, what I'm saying is we are all probably going to need a little help at some point, tipping the grief back into that healthy space, okay? And I want us to think about some of the research on this. For example, there was a beautiful study which came out of the Netherlands that did several interviews with older people who had subjectively described themselves as giving up, that they were finished. And in the Netherlands, of course, there is that, big debate that has gone on about physician-assisted suicide for elders who would like to avail of this, okay? And it's kind of a 50-50 kind of debate. And this research was very much interested in hearing from elders in their own voice, which is so important, in their own voice, how they would articulate this giving up experience. Where does it come from? How does it feel? How do they know it's there? Why is it there? They wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So there were 5 themes that these elders all kind of identified in their own way, which are really interesting, I think. And before we get into those, I just want us to also acknowledge the fact that the majority of elders don't feel like this. And the other thing is that we know that if we do begin to feel like this and we seek support, well over 80% of us negotiate this very, very well if we do kind of tip into this territory. But I think the importance of these themes is that I think they really do give voice to an experience that while not all elders will pervasively experience, they will dance with a little bit. I think many people will be able to identify with some of this, at least in pockets, okay? So let's think about it a little bit more. Let's bring it into our consciousness if you want, So one of the things that they had all identified was an aching sense of loneliness. This was how it was described. And this aching sense of loneliness kind of persisted even if they were in people's company. It's kind of an inner loneliness, an inner alienation, okay? One woman said, I go sometimes days without even hearing my own voice. Okay, so, that's a very painful thing to consider. And I would be willing to bet that there are many elders out there who have a similar experience, going days without hearing their own voice. So we can really kind of feel that, can't we? They also discussed the pain of not mattering anymore. So the feeling of not being important to anyone anymore, even if they had living relatives, missing their former occupations, missing the former contribution that they made, sometimes feeling ignored in the public space, feeling unnecessary, like there was no way for them to participate, feeling a little like it was not their world anymore. Okay. And what they also describe is still a very active desire to participate, but the feeling that that contribution was no longer wanted. Okay, that's pretty painful. Now, they talked about a difficulty expressing themselves. through the tasks that they used to be able to engage in that they can no longer engage in. Okay? So the feeling, if you were someone, for example, I don't know, who used to be quite active in sports, and you can no longer be active in sports, well, that feels like a key part of you that you can no longer express. If you were someone who was perhaps very creative with your hands, but you were dealing with arthritis or something, and you could no longer create in the way that you used to, you're really acutely feeling that. So almost a sense of losing the ability to express who they are through things that they did, okay? They talked about feelings of tiredness, this multi-directional tiredness. So it was physical tiredness, it was mental tiredness. And they would link this to things like symptoms. Sometimes they would link this tiredness to ruminating about things that had happened in the past or about unfinished business. And sometimes this tiredness would simply come from feeling that life was a bit mundane. And for some of them, this feeling of being tired sort of just manifested in an overall sense of boredom. All right? And the final thing that came up for this group of people, all of whom were highly independent people, it should be noted, was the fear of dependency. So a fear of dependency, a shame around needing people, a shame around dependency, particularly in relation to issues of the body, and an overall feeling of not wanting to be a burden. Okay, now, I think what we're really capturing in this is, I know this possibly sounds almost like depression, although they don't feel that the majority of these contributors were depressed. This is almost like what's been referred to as grief without sadness. Okay, I think that this is, in my opinion, grief that has settled into the identity almost. That's that grief, that second type of grief that we're talking in, where it starts to kind of seep into the sense of self, in a sense. And we can't help but wonder, and this is what the authors are wondering about too, if their social world was different, if the world around them was different, if society was offering alternatives to this experience, as well as an acknowledgement of things that they have lost, help in an active grieving, would this be their experience? And what the authors are kind of pointing out is, should we not be offering that instead of the option of physician-assisted suicide? Why are we jumping straight to something like physician-assisted suicide without considering the societal and cultural issues which are at play here when this happens for somebody? And so what we're saying here is, when someone starts to experience this type of alienation, when there are members of our community and our society who are saying, I think it would be better if I was done, and we offer physician-assisted suicide, are we really going to say that this is their issue? Or is this an issue with us? That's the issue at play here. And now I think what these elders are really highlighting for us is that this is disenfranchised grief. This is loss which has been left unattended for too long. That's how it moves into this type of territory. We can't help but wonder if this woman who says to us, I go days without hearing my own voice. Well, if she'd been hearing her own voice, and if other people had been hearing her own voice, would she be, quote unquote, giving up? That's what we have to be wondering about. And how do we change that? How do we impact that? One of the ways, I think, is by getting in there earlier with this type of loss, identifying it quicker and providing outlets for companionship through it to honor it as a sacred experience.